the discussion seems to be that risk reduction is a development activity which stops when the disaster strikes. What is risk? It's risk to human beings, not to dogs, cats, animals, and things of that sort. And the time when a disaster strikes is the point of maximum risk, and immediately after that. So risk reduction must encompass the entire spectrum, including response and response preparedness. If you respond well, you get people back on their feet faster, and you kill less people, hopefully, or save them from being killed. Here, when we talk about risk reduction, we sort of seem to think it's only about buildings and things of that sort. But what about the fire brigades? What about the emergency responders? People like the ones he's been dealing with. They save people. It's very difficult to empirically analyze what measures have been taken which might or might not have saved deaths or casualties on an event that has not occurred.
Guido Bertolaso, what's your experience running your agency in Italy beyond L'Aquila, before Aquila, and what you may expect, like with Vesuvius?
Which kind of risk reduction do you want to start with the Vesuvius risk? You should only take 500,000 people and move them somewhere else. Or if you have problems with L'Aquila, you should only try to reorganize and rebuild hospitals, schools, and private houses. How much does it cost? Is something that even industrialized countries, they cannot afford in this time, in a few years. So you have to be ready in order to deal with the risk. People must learn to live with risk, with a different risk, and know how to behave in case of emergency. Look at Katrina. Is the best example. With Katrina, we knew everything about the hurricane. Forecasting was working very properly. Information was spread on time. People were told, please leave New Orleans because an hurricane is coming. And then we had lots of, thousands of deaths. Why? Because was not managed in the proper way all the problem of risk. Managing risk is something extremely difficult. You need a kind of blending of some prevention, some forecasting, but even in the meantime organizing rescue teams and spreading information among the people. For me, it's much more important that people living nearby the Vesuvio, they need to know how to behave in case an eruption can occur in the coming days or in the coming weeks.
Loren.
Yes, I think, Nick, that we should look at investment in risk as an investment to save lives.
Are there clear figures? Is there a clear economic data on
definitely. That? In China, for example, in a span of 40 years, from 1960 to year 2000, they invested $3 billion in flood control projects, which averted $12 billion in loss. That's just China. There are many other countries. So governments, whether local or national, must look at their investment, their risk capital as an investment, not as a cost, meaning that if you invest $5 here, it is actually an investment compared to losing $50 when the disaster strikes and you are not ready and you've not built a good building. We must not sweep under the rug this issue of risk reduction. In fact, it's a glaring issue now, especially since resources are scarce. We must input this, whether you're a poor nation in Asia, Africa, or in the Pacific, whether you're a developed nation in Europe or in the Americas. Risk reduction must be part of the budgeting, of the mainstream it in the national development agenda.
Arjun Katoch, do you think that the economic data is overwhelming on this? Because one of the statistics which is well used is that £1 or $1 spent on reducing the risk of disasters will save $7 in terms of emergency response and reconstruction. Do you buy those kind of figures?
That's an urban myth. I have not read any study which justifies those figures.
But Guido is agreeing with those figures. He was nodding agreement.
Well, what it might save is reconstruction costs and insurance costs. But risk, as I said, is not to buildings, it's to human beings. The Japanese government spends 2.7 trillion yen a year on risk reduction, 5% of their general budget. Still people die in Japan from disaster, not many, but they still do. So, how many developing countries can spend 2.7 trillion yen a year? Very, very few.
I tell you something. It will be extremely difficult to find a government who is ready to pay in risk reduction and do some prevention. It's extremely difficult because with this kind of business, you will never win the elections. You win the election when you have a tragedy, you have an emergency, and the Prime Minister goes there in the picture, on the spot, and stays there for weeks and months, as has happened in the past. You lose the election if, like the President of the United States of America, is not ready to deal with the Katrina hurricane.
Lauren, do you buy that?
It's also a political problem.
This is part of, you're a senator. You're a politician.
First, you're realistic. It's not just in the places you mentioned, but it seems like you were talking about the Philippines as well. Politicians are politicians everywhere, third world or first world. But I want to change the face of politics, whether in the Philippines, in Italy, or Kenya, or whatever.
Are you succeeding?
I think so. My ratings are good. And all I'm saying is that it is about time that we educate the people that we're going to save your life, your wife, your children, your grandchildren. Livelihoods will be saved, and you will be more progressive.
But
You'll have food
GUIDO,
to eat.
who has the responsibility within a country like Italy?
We have to go beyond the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, and disaster relief. That's only one of the 5 elements of the Hyogo Framework for Action, but we should go beyond that and actually save lives and secure livelihoods.
A very firm defense there of the principle of risk reduction, Arjun.
In Metro Manila, the earthquake prevention study says if there's a 7 magnitude earthquake, you're going to have 16,000 buildings destroyed, you're going to have 150,000 buildings damaged, and 3 million displaced, with 118,000 who are injured. Now, surely we need to invest a little bit in responding to that tragedy, besides the risk reduction we've done, which is not going to prevent those 16,000 buildings. Or are we going to back engineer 16,000 buildings which we don't even know which ones they are? So I'm not saying risk reduction doesn't work. I'm saying sure it does. But it shouldn't stop at the point where a disaster strikes. It's an attitude which needs to go all the way through, right up to recovery.
Oh, definitely. Of course, we must be ready with response.
Edward Borodzic, how many is
people
the political cycle a limiter in the way risk is treated by the politicians who ultimately have to vote the money which is then used for risk reduction or disaster response?
I think the political cycle is particularly fascinating. I remember 20 years ago when I was better looking and I was a student, one of my old professors of risk management at the time said to me, there's nothing like a good disaster to get more funds into risk research. The problem with these disasters, they're low frequency, high impact events. They happen very infrequently in one particular place, but when they happen, they have a massive impact, which focuses the entire world's attention on what's happening. And then we say, why weren't we better prepared? Why didn't we have this in place? Why didn't we have that in place? And I think the idea that we could somehow prevent the risk throughout the world is just pie in the sky. You can't. What you can do is start thinking about how, at a global perspective, we're able to, if you like, mount some sort of response when a disaster takes place, that we're able to move in and help build. I think governments can do so much in terms of resilience of their populations, but I think we almost need a kind of an international response. Individual governments themselves have 4 or 5 year timescales. They're very focused on what their electorate are going to vote for or vote against.
Is this a real limiter then on the issue of risk reduction? The fact that politicians, those you are living and working with in Manila, they are seeing in terms of their electoral cycle, when much of what we're discussing here is about long-term investment, as you have just highlighted.
You know, Nick, I think that people are getting more aware. In fact, when floods come every rainy season, and people are going to say, we have floods again. What have our leaders done to save us from the floods? Have they cleaned the drainage? Have they cleaned the rivers? Have they thrown the garbage where it should not be? And therefore, the picture of politicians handing out rice, canned goods, saving people, it's a thing of the past, or becoming a thing of the past. And they will actually blame their government and their leaders for not administering well, for not implementing environmental laws. So it's about time that we invest in risk reduction, and the people will see that the absence of disasters, they'll notice, oh, life is better. Whereas last year there were big floods, it didn't happen because our leaders did something about it.
But Arjun has just given us very robust and worrying statistics about the vulnerability in Manila from earthquakes. How many people in central Manila know about that risk?
The agencies of government know the figures. We don't talk about it in the news every day. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news.